Welcome to the first session of the course on launching one-on-one meetings in the company. Today we'll discuss why businesses need meetings and how they work, in case we haven't met before. My name is Mike Pritula, and I'll tell you about my journey to one-on-one meetings. Overall, I've worked for companies like Bank. Now, to be precise, it was Alpha Bank, which is now Sense Bank, STB TV channel, which is part of the Starlight Media Group, Wargaming, Pre-Play Ideal. I consulted for PeopleForce, and now I'm focused on the Academy. I had my first one-on-one meeting as an employee. Of course, it was at Alpha Bank. More specifically, my supervisor conducted it with me, and I had several different supervisors. Sometimes they were informal with one leader, sometimes formal, but I quickly realized that these meetings were very different. I once had a situation where, during some restructuring, I was reassigned to a manager I hadn't chosen and who hadn't chosen me. I definitely wouldn't have gone to work for that person, and I don't know if they would have hired me. And the meetings with this manager were torture for me. I really wished they would be cancelled for any reason. You know how school children have that one class they hate, and they just wish the teacher wouldn't show up or that anything would happen to avoid that class. That's how I felt about meetings with one of my managers. On the other hand, my first really great one-on-ones were at STB TV channel. It wasn't even in my first year there. I think it was my third, when I was hired by the head of the holding company, and he had proper one-on-ones with me. It was once a week, and that's when I started looking forward to these meetings. I realized what an effective meeting is when you genuinely look forward to that day. We had them on Thursdays. I looked forward to Thursday more than Saturday because I wanted to talk to my supervisor, tell him about my problems, get some advice, maybe even gossip a bit, just chat. Discuss our shared interests. We were both into bodybuilding, so we'd also talk about cars and stuff like that. Things like that. As for conducting one-on-ones as a manager, I started doing that at STB TV channel, and how I came to do them is quite interesting. I think it'll be a good example for many other managers and HR professionals. So at STB TV channel, I came in as the head of recruitment and adaptation. For context, I was about 25 or 26 years old then, with almost no life experience. I start forming a department. I initially had 2 employees when I arrived, then I started looking for a third, and soon the department grew to 5-7 people. These people I recruited were about the same age as me, some older. And I tried out my first attempts at leadership. I assumed all employees were just like me, because I was an effective employee, so I applied the same methods I'd want applied to me. And I started to encounter some resistance, some rejection from certain people. Some employees even started complaining to my supervisor about me, saying I was very authoritarian in my management style, imposing my views, pushing things through, demanding, and not listening much. And my supervisor said to me, "You would probably benefit from taking a good management course, but I don't know which ones yet. I'll think about it. And then try taking a coaching course, because coaching will give you that missing part you lack in management, the ability to ask questions and listen to people, and to guide them so that they come to decisions on their own." I had a really great supervisor, so I fully trusted and listened to him saying, "Okay, where should I study?" "Well, there's a good place. We'll sign you up." They enrolled me, and I studied coaching once a week for 10 months. I learned to ask questions, practice active listening, notice details, and so on. And I started applying this at work in parallel. My situation changed dramatically. First of all, I looked at my employees differently and started working differently. Secondly, employees no longer saw me as some guy who just demands things, imposes decisions, and tells them what to do. They saw me as a truly mature leader who would listen, creating more of a partnership. Since then, I've had a great relationship with my team. I practiced holding regular one-on-ones with each employee individually once a week. Because a team meeting when the whole department gets together is different from what many have with their supervisor. Later, when I was in gaming, I initially had the role of HR business partner and then moved to total rewards. There, I conducted one-on-ones as HR, with executives as a business partner. So I had one-on-ones. I had a group of executives with whom I had regular baths. We have met. Here is pre-play. Again, I already had a team already, and the employees I have gamifying employee. With them also I spent Vanta. And at PP I had a team. I have another interesting case study about Preply. There and did not get an employee who has and then had tremendous professional talent but very weak soft skills. Employee consistently broke down on deadlines, on promises, on discipline. That is, he could banally not come to work on time, although even some meeting could be organized, or he could say, on Monday, I do not feel well, I am sick. I am probably home tonight. I mean, such a rambling person. I am with this man. There is a talent for professionalism. That is, when he did his professional work, he performed excellently. I spent a Vanta with him like I did with all the other employees. And we have been working on improving it with skillful discipline. And I was giving feedback. He was constantly blushing, literally. And I was as sensitive as possible, and I was telling the truth and saying what could be improved and why it was useful in building a dialogue. I would ask every time, look, I am not pushing you too hard. You are okay, are Vantu baths? He would say, yes, they help me. I am grateful to you for them. I realize I screw up, but thanks to you, I am learning to be more corporate. And when I left Pli afterwards, we were texting this person. He was saying that B. Antoine does not spend time with him now, and he misses it a lot. I felt like I, as a leader, was saying, yes, okay. I thought that when I left, he would cross himself, forget and say, foo. Thank goodness I do not have any more labor, but it surprised me that he said that is what he missed the most. And another interesting example, I had a coworker that she got a little older and we got her an assistant. And the first thing she did was very vivid to me too. The first thing she did with this assistant, she set up an appointment with Wang Ti. I mean, literally the first hours of work. So, you and I are going to have regular baths. I have bathtubs like that. They're very useful. That's why I'll be spending with you. Now we'll put it on your calendar and the wire's done. That is also such a good example when your employees start to carry this practice further. This is so about the Vantuvan experience for understanding how I feel about them. That is starting with STAR. In my 11th year, I completed my coaching training. My 11th year. All the time, wherever I worked, I had a regular weekly Vantut with my staff, with my team. You always strived with each person individually once a week. It was unfamiliar to many, but everyone moved in quickly, and everyone saw how cool it worked. All right, let's move on. So, in my work, I rely on best practice to always make sure that what I tell you is built not only on my experience, but on research and practitioners. And finally, it's time. I will be glad if you write about yourself, what position you have in HR. Are you a partner? Are you a business partner, or manager, or if I've gone too far? And in general, any position you have, write it down. I'm curious to know who we're here with. In the meantime, I'll talk about homework. This course, like all courses in general, has practice-oriented homework that is required for graduation. That's one. And two, they allow you to supervised application of all the things you learn, because I then read and give feedback. And they are all designed in such a way that everything you went through in the class can be applied in practice in your work. VDM's diploma is really good. Not only does it look good, he's a great addition to LinkedIn. A lot of people have this section empty. Therefore, when a person has some kind of professional diploma, it is an embellishment. Unequivocally your LinkedIn. And we give out on a good platform, on a professional platform. There are other top companies out there giving away. Okay, I see your answers. HR generalist. I'm HRG, a consultant to small and medium-sized business executives. That's cool. Nice to meet you. Let's move on. Our course about running Vantua meetings consists of sessions like this. Today we're going to talk about why they're needed and the format. In the second session, we'll break down the types of Vantuvan. In the third session, we'll talk about how you can build relationships between employees and supervisors or charas thanks to Vant. In session 4, we'll break down a very important coaching approach that greatly helps high-performing potential employees move forward in a big way. In the 5th withdrawal, we'll break down effective feedback as an important element of Vantuvan. And on the sixth one, we're going to talk about how to generally run this in a company. The course is both for HR who want to run it and for managers who want to conduct it. That is, it is both about how to put it into practice immediately and how to implement and launch it. So it's universal. Today in class, we will talk about why Google believes that without one-to-one, a business won't take off, the format of business performance from one-to-one, who the HR manager should conduct, how often to conduct, and where. That's the kind of topics we have today. So let's get started. I want to tell you about it in an appropriate way to understand the context of the situation, of this course, of the meetings. I want to tell you about a study by Google called Project Oxygen, which they first launched in 2008 year and repeated in 2018 year. In 2008 year, when the company had a good experience, a good result, and basically it's already quite a size. The company, she was the leader. She's the leader now, but back then they were there and not many people were close. And they figured we must be so brilliant and we have such great employees and we pay the big bucks. In general, we choose the best of the best that we probably don't need managers, in the classical sense of the word. We've outgrown that. And then there was some initial talk of holacracy. Peter Thiel, Tony Hsieh, delivering happiness, started writing about his management practices. But Google is a company that always makes a decision based on data, analytics, research, and so on. She couldn't say, let's fire all the managers and be managerless. Let's bring in some research. In general, we do or don't need managers. They have launched a serious project, which was called Oxygen, where they tried to analyze if there was anything that executives were doing that might have led to some better results. Results are easy to perform, unit results, execution of plans, and the like. Started this research and concluded that yes, having managers, it does affect business performance. Managers are needed. And there are 8 competencies in managerial behavior that contribute to business performance. And 10 years later, when they decided to double check, it's been 10 years. Maybe really outgrew those managers. Maybe we don't need it. We did some more research and came to the conclusion that we still need 2 more competencies. I attribute these 2 new competencies to the growth of the company from the 1,000th to the 100,000th. Accordingly, there is now a set of competencies for every manager, for every executive at Google, that executives have to meet. And Google is still training people to do that. That is, teaching them how to research. Let's explore these competencies. There are only 10 of them. They sound like this. There will be a link to this project at the bottom for anyone interested. And the ideal leader is a good coach, empowering the team and not micromanaging, creates a team atmosphere caring for the success and well-being of people, productive and results-oriented. A good communicator listens, shares information, supports career development and discusses performance, has a clear vision of the strategy for their team, possess the key technical skills required to advise the team. That's a Google specificity. They said they have a crisis of confidence in their team when the person is not an expert professionally. That is, they find it difficult to trust a manager who knows less than they do. The 9th, the 10th, which came after 10 years, collaborate with everybody in the company, which is important. Such a link connecting his team with everybody in the company. And the 10th is the decisive decision maker, which in a large company, of course, decisions are made locally. Specifically, 3 competencies are maximally associated with one-to-one's meetings. Well, first of all, a good coach is clearly about these meetings, and secondly, about telemanagement and team support. But what the meeting does for you. Next, if you look at how Google checks whether executives meet these 10 competencies or not, and this is an annual all-employee questionnaire where employees rate their managers, and managers are then shown the average rating for all their employees with scores. That is, I understand as a supervisor, which items I score lower on and which items I score higher on, and I'm shown an average comparison to the rest of the company. I mean, I understand how with other executives I'm worse or better. And these are the questions that, again, what Vantu touches on reveals. 1. My supervisor gives me effective feedback that helps me to improve my performance. The second is that my supervisor is not a micromanager, meaning he is not given to details that are discussed at other levels. Third, My supervisor treats me as an individual. Fourth, through his actions, my manager shows that he objectively evaluates the expertise I bring to the team, even if it differs from his own. And seventh point, my supervisor had an important conversation with me about professional development over the past 6 months. Again, these are the points that, if implemented correctly, the meeting of regular quanta, they will improve. Staff will respond better. If you want to evaluate executives, sometimes HR has this difficulty. There is an understanding that some practice or program would be suitable for us. There is a desire to implement it, but the managers do not support it much. Need some kind of trigger, need some kind of argument. Then to implement Antoine's meeting, a good argument might be for triggering the assessment. I mean, let's evaluate the leaders, look at the evaluations, then here's the right Vanta meeting. That is, it can be applied. Let's move on. Now directly slip meet the cable. Here is this list of 17 employee situations, that's what I called it, who are really 17. We compiled it already at IDL. This is the company where we have, among all my experiences, our first full partner role. Although it can be said that different people performed the role of partners in various companies for me. For example, at Pele, I had a people operations manager and a happiness manager who also served as partners to some extent. At Wargaming, I had them called HR managers by their title in the company. In fact, these were the partners who met with the employees. On STB TV channel, recruiters partially played the role of partners for me. They were interested in it. I trained them in coaching. I came up with a model for them where they connect with people. It was career counseling. That is, on STB TV channel, I practiced career counseling when people could go to the recruiting department and get advice on furthering their career because the recruiters were experts in us, in the requirements, in the competencies, so that's how they work. But let's get back to Ideal. WD, I had a role as a partner on the team. It was a great internal candidate. It was a former office manager who knew almost everyone. So she communicated with everyone, listened to their concerns, tried to help, solve problems, improved efficiency. But when she wanted to be a partner, when we made her a partner, I didn't understand. What's my role? And we sat down with my deputy and her and said, let's write down the situations that you need to identify and resolve. So your job as a partner is to find people who have problems in their work, meet with them and solve those problems in different ways. We came up with situations. She would then meet, she would get information about people, either from the people themselves, because everyone in the company knew they didn't address it themselves, that kind of problem, either from managers or from employees, i.e., employees came and said, listen, pay attention to this person. There's such a problem. Or it could be some kind of questionnaire where you can see that the person is talking about something. So there were many sources of information. What is the essence of these 17 situations? And what's the point of the one-on-one meeting? I want to give you an analogy that is probably understandable to absolutely everyone. Let's say you and I have a business, a fleet of cabs. We have 100 cars. We have an app like Uber only with our own taxi cars and our cab orders. And now imagine what a car is. Probably many people have a car or have a car in the family. They break down. If a cab breaks down, it doesn't make money. Provided the cab service has enough calls, that is not easy. So the cab service tries to fix any car as quickly as possible. So they understand that any delay is a loss of money. Now let's imagine a company of employees. The employees for the company are like 100 cars in a cab service. That is, each employee has a role to fulfill. And they too, like a car, can break down. People have all sorts of breakdowns too. Moreover, people are more prone to breakdowns than machines, but less so than equipment. Because we have real breakdowns like getting sick, getting injured. Then we have mental breakdowns, getting offended, getting upset, and so on. But humans have one glaringly obvious disadvantage. You can't always see it. We're good at hiding our problems. Yes, we can look normal and even say we're fine, but at the same time, we can be broken inside and not working at full efficiency. For some people, it's obvious. For example, in the sales department, if a salesperson starts selling a lot less in any given week, it's likely to be noticed. But for many people, it's going to be unnoticeable, especially executives, and many roles where results aren't as obvious. Plus, it's not always clear if there might be a client problem there. Therefore, the one-on-one meeting is essentially a way of discovering people's problems and addressing them in order to have each person work to the best of their abilities, but without burning out or wearing themselves out. That is, in a good way, maximizing their potential. And if a person eliminates all these problems that they may have, let's see. Conflict follows, conflict within the team. If a person has a conflict with someone on the team, it will affect performance. Conflict with another team. Resentment towards the company, overload, burnout. Someone's being headhunted, a person thinks, gee, maybe it's unrealistic to leave here. Personal problems, health issues, low motivation, low efficiency, can't see the future of the company, doesn't embrace change, uninteresting tasks, lack of management. Well, these are examples. That setup won't work. So, let's answer the question of why one-on-one meetings are needed. By the way, I call them tons. They can be called one-on-ones or individual meetings. And there are many more spelling variations, two-on-one, one-on-one, one-to-one, well, basically a million. I think basically everyone understands what this is about. So a one-on-one is a way of getting the most out of the team. And here's face-to-face. Thank you, Gulnara. They're also called touch-base, catch-up. For example, I have a meeting with one of my partners. He called it cap, but it's kind of like catching up with someone, not capping. They have different names. By the way, when I worked in gaming, my American supervisor also called it something with an interesting exotic name. So, it's a way to find answers within the team to questions that come up so that the team works as efficiently as possible. But the meetings themselves, the fact of meeting, is not yet achieving the goal. When I implemented one-on-one meetings, and I implemented them quite persistently, some managers told me that we already have talks, we're with our employees, and they're individual. Yes, individual, we talk there for half an hour a week. We sit in the same office, we talk every day. And we don't just chat for an hour, we chat all day long. I say, look, okay, I'll propose a meeting structure to you. Just however you communicate now, simply conduct the meeting according to this scenario. Have that experience and see what will be different. And then even the most skeptical people came to me saying, listen, you know, it was different. And people who cover the topic of one-on-one meetings in some courses, which we sometimes touch on, say that, yes, I constantly communicate with employees, but I tried it. I held a meeting. I learned so much. We retained an employee thanks to this meeting. It turns out that was a problem. So the important thing here is to be able to ask the right questions in the right sequence and in the right format. That's when these meetings will work. So just meeting is good, but it's still not the maximum result. Let's move on. In a meeting, I call it a side effect. But I think it's a side effect that everyone wants. There is really another result, a strong improvement in the relationship with each employee. Moreover, when the meeting is held by the manager, the relationship with the manager improves. When the meeting is held by HR, it improves relationships for HR. And HR has the opportunity to have meetings with managers and with employees, and the relationship improves in both cases. I mean, when I was, for example, on the STR TV channel, as a director, instantly, as a business partner, introduced the practice of regular meetings with business leaders to discuss various issues. I've seen our relationships improve a lot. I don't know how much it's exactly what many are looking for, how to build trust with management so that you're accepted, loved in the end. These meetings, if they are held, change things, people appreciate the attention, questions of help, and so on. And you know, they say this phrase, an employee comes to work for a company and leaves because of the manager. That is, what ultimately matters to the employee is who the manager is, what the relationship is like. The one-on-one meeting is an opportunity to build great relationships so that employees don't quit because of their managers. Now for the principles. First of all, the meeting shouldn't be a mystery. Anything you want to discuss, you can freely say it before the meeting. Secondly, there should be full transparency, that is, with complete trust in each other without any underhanded things. Regularity is really important. It shouldn't be spontaneous or chaotic. And the result of the meeting should be actions. That is, Whoever holds a meeting with an employee should conduct it in such a way that the employee preferably comes away with some actions, not just some knowledge. If there's a feeling that these meetings will take up a lot of the manager's time, I can show a simple calculation that you can actually just vary the frequency of meeting with individual employees, but in general, you can keep your workload at 2 hours a week, no more. That's basically not a lot for a manager's most important activity of the week. I mean, look at the situation. The manager spends, we're going to talk about that in a moment, half an hour per employee. It comes out to about 2 hours or even 1.5 to 2 hours a week. But for each employee, this hourly investment then affects 40 or even more hours of the employee's work. That is, the manager spent half an hour and the employee has 40 different hours if meetings are once a week. So it's still an investment that pays off big time. So the format, I recommend 30 minutes. Hour-long meetings are bad, they're evil, they're really bad. I wouldn't recommend it. It's better to have regular 30-minute meetings. And hour-long meetings risk the manager wanting to sacrifice meetings with employees for some more important meeting, which will then become a practice. Next, when a manager holds a meeting with an employee, they give their full attention to the employee. That is, they are not a consumer of the meeting. They're not conducting it for themselves, but for the employee. There should be a chosen goal, and the employee should have the opportunity to talk about any topics of interest for the first 10 minutes. That is, the leader may not switch for 10 minutes directly to some stages of the conversation, which we will now analyze. But in a free format, talk to employees even about the most unrelated topics. So it's an opportunity for an employee to speak freely. Condition. It should be a convenient time when the employee is not being interrupted, when no managers are interrupting. A comfortable place like a meeting room, or if it's the manager's office, maybe a couch where you can sit without a desk between you, and a frank tone. Sincere, honest, open, like the approach used in coaching. That's it. You know what? I would recommend that executives just get a coaching session somewhere, buy a trial one, I don't know, at the company's expense and see how coaches behave, because in coaching, the candid tone is consistently maintained. Next, now for the most important part, plaque. I've been working towards this for a long time, both in terms of personal experience and in terms of books, various articles, and different approaches. I don't know how many sources I've analyzed or how many methods I've tried, but I've come to the conclusion that this meeting plan is the most effective. Warm up, what they'd like to talk about, task status, coaching, feedback, next steps, agreement on the next meeting, and relationship building. Now for more details. During the warm-up, the leader's task is to establish what's called rapport. Rapport is a state in communication. It's taught to psychologists, coaches, negotiators, salespeople, diplomats, and so on, as well as politicians and journalists, so that people who study rapport can quickly establish trusting relationships. For example, when a journalist interviews a subject, they need to build trust quickly. When a salesperson sells something to a customer, it's the same thing. Well, it's needed in many situations. It's essentially like tuning into an employee's Wi-Fi. When there's a manager and an employee, it's as if the manager is tuning into the employee. There are two phases here. A clear joining phase, meaning the manager's job is to connect with the employee and then guide the conversation. This rapport depends on the ability to connect with the other person. And connection is the foundation. Connecting means essentially adjusting yourself to the person's wavelength. There's that phrase, we're on the same page, we're not on the same page. I'm on your wavelength, you're on my wavelength. In emotional intelligence, it's called getting into resonance. Let's move on. Experienced coaches and negotiators establish rapport very quickly and deeply. By the way, you can see many examples of politicians and journalists seemingly copying each other. That's the basis of rapport right there. Why do we mirror posture, that is, take a similar pose? Here are examples of poses, they're very similar. We connect to human values, breathing patterns, depth, and frequency of content. So we're talking about what's important to people, vocal tone and pace, cultural environment, emotions, body language, and speech. All of this should happen here to the maximum extent. The more channels of connection, the deeper the rapport. Let's move on. The main question that starts an effective one-on-one meeting is, how are you doing? It's a super simple, super popular question, but at the same time very important and powerful. Why? Because we ask, how are you doing, to our friends, acquaintances, and relatives? And it's basically, a sign of informality. And it's quite different from how managers sometimes ask employees, for example, well, report? Well, tell me what you've got. What do we have? What's good? Which is very manipulative and aggressive. What's good? As if to say, don't tell me about anything bad. You came, there must be something good. You came? But how are you doing is sincere. For me, the question, how are you doing, impressed me the most when I worked at the STB TV channel. I had meetings with the CEO, and television is always something wow. Plus, the CEO was also such a vibrant personality. And when I came to a meeting with the CEO to get approval for something or to present something, and he asked, how are you doing? And it really seemed like he was more interested in how things were really going, what was happening with me, why I came. And it really put me in a great mood. And I always enjoyed meetings with the CEO, even though it's not there anymore. But I liked the overall approach. Why is this important? At the beginning of the session, I talked about my experience where I had a situation where I hated meetings with one of my managers. I wished they would be canceled. And on the other hand, I had meetings with another manager that I really looked forward to. It's very important to build a meeting practice where employees will look forward to them. Even if it will be like in my experience with Split, when an employee constantly had meetings, it was stressful. That is the person visually. I stayed as gentle as possible. The person was probably sensitive, and for the first time received such objective feedback, but he never rescheduled them or asked to reschedule or avoided them. That is, he looked forward to them. He understood that it would not be easy and left with gratitude. That's how important this part is. That's why we need to do everything right, as we're going to discuss and are discussing today. If you don't do this, then it will all collapse like a house of cards. It won't work. Let's move on. Now for some super cool questions. Here I am, like I don't know how I pulled nuggets out of a pile of sand and found them, questions that I've been pondering and reflecting on. Questions that help discuss with an employee how their week went, for example. But they're also very constructive, positive, and coaching, helping you remember what happened, which people often feel fearful and insecure about, thinking, man, I haven't done anything like that this week. Although in reality, they couldn't possibly redo everything. What was good this week? What was the best meeting this week? Why? What was the best conversation you had this week? What was the best moment when you felt your growth this week? What accomplishments from last week are you proud of? What are you looking forward to next week? What interesting things did you learn in last week's meeting? These are the kinds of questions, and the employee shares how their week went. Then the manager switches to focusing on the upcoming week or the future. It's important to remember that this is an investment of several dozen hours. Questions that help. What are your priorities for next week? Here, the manager has a chance to change them if the employee chose something inappropriate for themselves. What do you plan to finish next week? What kind of help do you need? This question is very important. And the manager really does talk about help every time. Even if it's not needed, it builds the employee's confidence that help will be there when it's needed. It's an easier way to deal with problems, knowing that you'll get help anyway. What needs to be done now for a better situation in the future? These are the kinds of questions. Next, when appropriate, the manager applies coaching, a tool for even more employee development and even more quality feedback. Coaching is generally a very large and interesting topic in itself. We have an entire course on coaching. But to summarize, coaching can be called different things. Sometimes what isn't coaching might accidentally be called coaching. But correctly, coaching is about unlocking an employee's personal potential to maximize their performance. It's more about helping with learning rather than teaching directly. For example, in standard training, when a manager interacts with an employee, they typically pass on their knowledge, skills, and ideas. In coaching, on the contrary, the manager tries not to share as a manager, but for the employee to come to it themselves. And the employee makes their own decision and grows on their own, unlike training where the manager has more influence. Coaching will be covered separately in this course as a feedback session. We'll touch on feedback a little bit too. There are rules in feedback. Not all feedback is good. Feedback can be harmful if you're doing it wrong. What do you mean by harmful? It's important to understand that feedback has only one purpose. And it's far from telling an employee what you think of them. Because most managers envision feedback as a tool to tell an employee what they think of them, and so that the employee repents, feels guilty, realizes their weakness, stupidity, and so on. That's how managers often perceive it. This has nothing to do with feedback. The main goal of feedback is to help the employee be a little more effective tomorrow than they were today or yesterday, and effectiveness will only improve if you follow a certain sequence of actions and specific approaches. One such approach is the right balance of feedback. Then we tell the employee that we would recommend changing something. It's very important to talk about something that's already good, in an important proportion, because when the proportion is broken, all feedback stops working. That's its rule. There should be 3 things that are good and 1 that's not so great. And if everything is, not great, not great, not great, then employees' self-esteem will drop, confidence will drop, motivation will drop, and it's likely to get even worse after such feedback. The manager will feel good in the moment because they've expressed themselves, vented, unloaded, freed up, but the employee feels bad. That's why balance is important. That's why it's recommended this way. This is good, and this is not so good? Well, feedback is also mistakenly confused with criticism or praise. Feedback, criticism, and praise are 2 extreme poles of feedback, and that's probably 5% of all the feedback you can give an employee. There are many more reasons and needs for feedback than just when an employee screwed up badly or achieved some unimaginable heights. Feedback is simply giving people information about how they performed in terms of outcomes, events, incidents, behaviors, in the sense that the manager usually knows how things could have been done better, then saw any deviations from some ideal scenario and constructively, efficiently, and appropriately showed the employee where improvements could be made. That's what feedback is. If the manager is even a little bit experienced, and usually they are more experienced than the employees, you can definitely see where the employee can improve. Then there's a discussion of further actions, an agreement to meet. The action is recorded in the form of meeting outcomes. It's great when there's special software for one-on-one meetings. For example, PeopleForce has functionality where you can schedule meetings, record outcomes, save them to track later. It's good when outcomes are recorded. And when the meeting ends, it's really cool to immediately discuss when the next one will be. Because the employee will have a clear understanding. Yeah, we agreed on something, and I'll have another meeting where we'll revisit this. It creates a gentle, simple time pressure. So it's not like I just talked and that's it. Maybe someday I'll do something about it. No, we talked and discussed something. I took on some actions to complete before the next meeting. But that's not all. We don't end there. It's also very important to end positively, just like we started our one-on-one meeting with small talk and positive conversations. It's crucial to conclude by letting the employee go while showing support, faith, and interest in them as a person. So here we need to talk about things that are a bit removed from the specific situation or current week. We can discuss work in general. What do you like about the job? What don't you like? We can talk about life, weekend plans, vacation, or birthday plans. In general, having information about an employee like their kids, spouse, and so on. This demonstration of interest and care and really common topics, even if there were some rough patches during the meeting, these questions show the employee. Despite me being the manager and you being the employee, and me giving you some feedback, we're just people. We're built as people, we communicate as people. So let's not forget that. Homework for those in the course, and for those not in the course, feel free to join. Conduct a one-on-one meeting with an employee. Whether you're in HR or a manager doesn't matter. Follow the script completely and write a brief summary of how it went. Just about a page. Books I'd recommend on coaching and feedback. Great books. And more useful questions for one-on-one meetings will be linked for various life situations. This concludes our topic on why these meetings are necessary. Next, we'll talk about different types and everything else. That's all. If you have any questions, write them down. If there are no questions, Write down what was most valuable for you today, what you're taking away from this. To watch on YouTube, like, subscribe, all that stuff, you know how it's done. Great, thank you. Yes, thank you for your feedback as well. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, let's wrap it up. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you for watching, and see you soon. Bye-bye. See you around. Classes will be under a different course. So keep an eye out and join us. Bye.